I watched the worst episodes of Star Trek. Hi, I'm Rodney Donahue, and this is going to be a fun episode in which I talk about the worst episode from each Star Trek series. I decided to pick my least favorite episode of each incarnation of Star Trek to watch and determine which is the best of the worst and which is the single worst episode of all of the hundreds of episodes of Star Trek. Now, when I did my top 5 episodes of Star Trek The Next Generation, I was very careful to watch each individual episode that I thought might make the list. I went through a couple dozen episodes of Star Trek in a very short period of time. I was very careful. I was not as careful with this list because I was not going to watch 25 of the worst episodes of all of Star Trek just to try to figure this out. So I made a nice list that I thought covered all of my bases, all of the things that I think are bad, and I went ahead and picked the episodes from the list that I thought were just awful.
Which would you place first?
I'd like to talk about these in series progression. So I don't want to talk about them in order from best to worst or worst to best. Instead, I just want to talk about them from a purely objective perspective, starting with the original series. I'll do original series, Next Gen, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, and then finally Enterprise. But I want to make sure that when I talk with you about them, that I'm not leading anyone in any particular direction. And remember, these are very bad episodes of Star Trek. These are not good. For each episode, I am going to ask some basic questions, like, what happens in the episode? Why is this episode the worst of the series?
Catherine Pulaski, author of Linear Models of Viral Propagation.
What is the worst moment from this episode? Did anything funny happen? Were there any bad moments that were funny, whether they were intentional or not? What are the redeeming qualities of the episode? Does it have any redeeming qualities?
You know, the sun only comes up once a month on the moon.
And finally, why does the episode occur? I think it's really important that I try to determine the purpose of the episode and where it fits in Star Trek.
As soon as she found out about an opening on the Enterprise, she put in a request for transfer.
The episode I chose from Star Trek The Original Series is from Season 2, and it's called Catspaw.
There is nothing else down there that's alive.
What happens in Catspaw? In Catspaw, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are serenaded by the 3 witches from Macbeth. Then, they get chained in a haunted house. Later, Kirk and Spock are chased by a giant black cat, and in the end, 2 little blue puppets die. There's a lot of crazy stuff that happens in Catspaw. It's an almost indecipherable episode of television.
I don't understand. I read...
Whatever it is you read it wrong.
Why does this episode occur? I don't know. I don't know why this episode happens. Kirk sums it up by explaining that it was real because a guy died.
No illusion. Jackson is dead.
But was there any reason that this episode exists in Star Trek? I don't think so. I cannot find a reason behind this episode. There are plenty of bad episodes of Star Trek the original series, I wrote down a few here. The Apple, Shore Leave, The Alternative Factor, Assignment Earth, Spock's Brain, The Cloudminders. These are very bad episodes of Star Trek. I know why those episodes were made. I don't know why they made Catspaw. So why is Catspaw the worst episode of Star Trek the original series? Well, Catspaw is just a disjointed mess of random Halloween-themed elements.
There is a curse on your ship.
There are spooky witches. There is a castle built into a mountain, just like in another episode that I'm going to talk about later. There are aliens that masquerade as humans, cats, and giant cats. Trick or treat is said quite a bit.
Trick or treat on us. Trick or treat, Captain? Yes, Mr. Spock.
There are skeletons. There's Enterprise voodoo. And Spock says fascinating when they see. I can't even get through it. This is like my third take. Spock says, this episode is so bad. Spock says, whoo. Spock says, fascinating.
Fascinating.
When they see these sad little blue puppets. And I think he's exaggerating just a little bit. He's really overstating the situation by using the word fascinating. I don't think I'm going to get a better take, so I'll just, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, it's bad. These episodes are terrible. The worst moment from Catspaw. Yeah, the two puppets at the end are just sad, but the serenading witches, I think they take the cake when it comes to bad Star Trek. Are there any funny moments from Catspaw?
Captain.
Catspaw has a lot of funny moments. There's the scary shadow of a cat. There's the giant cat knocking down the big steel door and killing the good alien. No. There's the cat wandering through small recreations of the large sets. Of course, the little blue aliens. At the beginning, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy go different directions in the castle, but when they come back from the commercial break, they're all just right there, and then they all head one direction. There's some very inappropriate music in this episode. The soundtrack for this episode is really weird. It sounds a lot like A Streetcar Named Desire. The worst Star Trek costume ever shows up in this episode, and that's saying something. In hundreds of episodes of Star Trek, this has the worst costume.
The cat is the most ruthless, most terrifying of animals.
Spock calls cats terrible. I'm on board with that. Does Catspaw have any redeeming qualities?
What we've just seen is not real. That's useful.
One thing that I found in Star Trek the original series is that no matter how poor the direction, no matter how preposterous the situation, no matter how bad the dialogue, William Shatner, Leonard Nimoy, and DeForest Kelley always grind through as professionals.
Thanks.
And I really respect almost all of the choices that they make for their characters in Star Trek the original series, and that holds up in Catspaw. In Catspaw, Kirk, Spock, and McCoy all treat the situation as though it isn't this giant Halloween joke.
Sylvia, I have the transmuter. It's mine now.
Except for when they make Halloween jokes.
3 witches. What appears to be a castle and a black cat.
So what can I say about Catspaw? It's terrible.
But I'll bet you credits to Navy beans we can put a dent in it.
It's kind of funny when the giant cat shows up and peers through the window and kills the guy by knocking the door onto him. The aliens, they don't make a lot of sense as aliens. I'm not quite sure why they're trying to do this. They seem more corporeal at the end as these little blue things than they do. I don't know why they would choose to become the things that they do. So it's just a bad episode. In my opinion, it's the worst episode of Star Trek: The Original Series, and I don't have anything else to say about it. What do The Child, Manhunt, Up the Long Ladder, Shades of Grey, The Icarus Factor, and Unnatural Selection have in common? It's Catherine Pulaski.
Author of Linear Models of Viral Propagation?
I will say it was tough to pick a worst episode of Star Trek: The Next Generation.
I can only tell you how much I regret the burden we've imposed on you.
My 3 big contenders were Up the Long Ladder, Manhunt, and Unnatural Selection, though I did consider Force of Nature and Emergence. Emergence is no one's favorite episode of Star Trek. Manhunt, Up the Long Ladder, these are no one's favorite episodes of Star Trek. If The Child or The Icarus Factor or Unnatural Selection are your favorite episodes of Star Trek, you need to watch a 4th episode right away. My pick for Star Trek: The Next Generation is Unnatural Selection. Unnatural Selection is the worst episode of a great television series. What happens in Unnatural Selection? In Unnatural Selection, Dr. Pulaski contracts a virus that makes her super old because she doesn't follow quarantine procedures.
The enclosed environment of the shuttlecraft concentrated my exposure.
She gets old, but she doesn't die. The end. Why does unnatural selection need to occur? Why does it happen? What is the purpose for making an episode like Unnatural Selection?
You've had the opportunity to observe Dr. Pulaski for some time now. How would you evaluate her as a chief medical officer?
Unnatural Selection gives Pulaski her own episode, and it works to mend some of the conflict that exists early on in Season 2 between herself and Captain Picard.
Well, my arguments don't seem to have any effect on him. We just end up quoting regulations to each other.
She certainly does not work on her hostility with Data in this episode.
Where I received
A more than passing grade, no doubt. Please, come aboard. We don't have much time.
She is terrible to Data in every episode that she's in with him. Peak Performance, The Measure of a Man, Elementary, My Dear Data, and she is no different in Unnatural Selection.
I hate to keep reminding you, but you are a machine. You'll be perfectly safe.
That is by no means certain, Doctor.
It's the worst because, Pulaski's boring. She's just boring. The story's boring. Everyone in the cast looks bored in every single scene, from the bridge to the conference room. Everyone is bored. There's a really awkward tone at the end of the episode as Pulaski's giving her star log and they destroy the quarantined vessel.
Scientists believe no experiment is a failure.
I also don't know why the Federation is conducting these genetic experiments. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan was all about how they ceased genetic experimentation like this, and yet here we have unnatural selection where they're doing the exact same thing. Also, why does humanity need to evolve?
And all are telekinetic. Watch.
If we're talking about Gene Roddenberry's look at humanity in the future,
He has not said anything.
Oh, yes, he has. Troy is right. He's telepathic.
do we have to shut our mouths and gain telepathic powers? I mean, I know the creators of Star Trek probably wish I wouldn't talk about these episodes, that I just think these things. What is the worst moment in Unnatural Selection?
If she's going to be consigned to oblivion.
Well, the worst moment in Unnatural Selection is when Pulaski is saved. Actually, any moment between Pulaski and Data, almost throughout the entirety of the second season, is just a worst moment for Star Trek.
You are certain the captain approved this, Doctor?
You'll take us a few hundred meters away from the Enterprise and hold position.
Picard acts very awkwardly at the beginning of this episode. I'm not quite sure why this occurs, but it's very strange. It's not very Picard-like.
You've had the opportunity to observe Dr. Pulaski for some time now. How would you evaluate her as a chief medical officer?
And it's very odd. It's a very odd beginning. And so even Picard, even Patrick Stewart, is not acting in a normal way in Unnatural Selection.
Yes.
Are there any funny moments in Unnatural Selection?
I'm Dr. Pulaski, Chief Medical Officer.
Yes. Unnatural Selection has a really funny moment where the woman on the planet interrupts Picard.
Doctor, did you hear what I said? All the 26 men and women aboard that ship were dead.
I heard you, Captain, and the prognosis is alarming.
And then Pulaski introduces herself, and the woman on the planet says,
Catherine Pulaski, author of Linear Models of Viral Propagation?
Catherine Pulaski, author of this random paper? And Pulaski says, that was a long time ago. And the woman says,
But still the standard.
that was pretty funny. I don't think it was meant to be funny. I think it's unintentional, but it's pretty funny to me. Does Unnatural Selection have any redeeming qualities? I can't come up with any.
I celebrated my 35th birthday a week ago.
Manhunt and Up the Long Ladder were very close to being the worst episode, but each of those episodes, I instantly thought of a redeeming quality for them. In Manhunt, Picard is supposed to have dinner with Loxana Troi, and he invites Data to the dinner to get himself out of any romantic entanglements that might occur. So automatically right there's a redeeming quality that Unnatural Selection doesn't have.
Fascinating data.
Up the Long Ladder was very close to being the worst episode. But the woman who plays the Irish lady who puts everybody in their place on both the Enterprise and in the colony, she has such a great standout performance.
And what are you staring at? You never seen a woman before?
I thought I had.
That right there in and of itself was a redeeming quality. There are no redeeming qualities in Unnatural Selection. In fact, the guest actors that they brought in were terrible. The woman who operates Darwin Station, her delivery is terrible for almost every single line.
I heard you, Captain, and the prognosis is alarming, but my immediate concern is our children.
So are there any redeeming qualities in Natural Selection? No. No redeeming qualities.